All right. Just a quick test to confirm that you can hear me. Yes. Audio is good. Excellent. So the reason why I'm looking there is because that's where I have the chat. And then I'm going to present from there. So while I'm presenting, I'm going to look in at you. Okay. So please just bear with me and watch this side of my face. So hello to everyone. Welcome to this workshop. It's great to be here, and I'm very happy that there's a lot of people here who seem to be very, very excited about this workshop. So no pressure. Nice posters, thank you. Right, so before we get started, let me just ask you a couple of things about your experience with Gatsby. So, what is your experience with Gatsby? Have you used it? Did you run some projects? Are you an expert? Is this your first time using it? And also let me know where you're from, because I'm just curious to know where everybody is from. So just use the chat to type in these messages. So Muhammad says that's the first time he's using Gatsby. Oh, okay, there's a lot of messages now. So people from Philadelphia, Switzerland, Berlin, Germany, Seattle, welcome, Toronto, welcome. Using Gatsby a lot, also integrated snip cart already. That's great. Utah, Toronto, India, Netherlands, built a few projects with Gatsby, Edmonton, Denver, okay, Colombia, bienvenidos, Vietnam, Brazil, Yorkshire, very nice, Utah, LA, London, Budapest roots, good stuff, Montreal, okay, I'm not going to read everyone, I'm so sorry, there's just so many of you, I didn't realize, Pakistan, so welcome to everyone, Mexico, UK, okay, so people from literally all over the place. That's great. So welcome to you also. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. So based on what I'm reading here, some of you are new to Gatsby, some of you are just learning Gatsby, some of you are Gatsby experts. So there's going to be bits in this workshop where if you're a Gatsby expert, I'm sorry, I'm going to go through some of the basics of Gatsby. If it gets too boring, just please bear with me. If you're new to Gatsby, feel free to stop me and ask your questions. I try to accommodate everyone's sort of skill levels here. So if something doesn't make sense, we can spend a couple of minutes discussing some stuff. Hello from Berlin. Hello, wie geht's? Lots of people. Awesome. So just to let you know what's going to happen in this workshop, I have prepared a couple of slides, and I'm not really a fan of presenting from slides. So I think I have about 5 or 6 of them. And then we're going to jump into my code editor. Now, excuse me, normally when I do a workshop, what I do is, I have my projector behind me. This is in-person events, right? So I tell you a task, and then you do the task, and I go around in the room and I help people out. Unfortunately, this is not going to be happening because it's incredibly difficult to know what you're doing. So what I'm going to do is kind of code and explain in the same time as much as I can. And we're going to start from a sort of skeleton application that I created already, and then we're going to build up an e-commerce app, essentially. I'm going to show you the end result as well, of course. And I'm going to give you access to the code, so you will have access to the code on GitHub. So, if you miss something, you can always go back to it and reference it. Furthermore, I'm also going to give you a link to a site where this entire course is recorded, and it's much more detailed than what I can put into this relatively short period of time for this workshop. Right, best background wall ever. Thank you very much. Now, obviously people are using the chat. Do use that chat as well to ask your questions. I'll try my best to take a look at your messages and try and answer your questions. Judging by the amount of messages I just got, it may be very difficult, but I'll try to do my best. If I do not see your question, don't be shy, just ask it again and keep on asking it until I don't see it. Right, so with that, what I'm going to be doing is a screen share. And just bear with me for 1 second because I'm trying to get the right screen shared. It should be this one. Okay, so hopefully you see my screen being shared. Now, before we start with anything, I just put a message in here which says, hello, can you read this? Can you just confirm that you can actually read that text? You want me to increase the size? Yes, 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 you can read that. Perfect. So I'm going to leave my settings with this font size. Perfect. Someone asked about the favorite Star Wars film. Classics, 4, 5, 6, all of them. Okay, so I promise you a couple of slides, and I will introduce myself as well, right? I'm sorry I'm being rude, but I was just chatting with you guys. Right, so creating e-commerce sites using Gatsby, that's our topic, and then this is me, so you already see me via my webcam. My name is Tamas. I work as a developer experience engineer at a company called Cloudinary. I am a Google developer expert in web technologies, and I also run my own business, which is called Full Stack Training, where I pretty much do workshops like these or similar to these. You can find me on Twitter as well, so that you see my Twitter handle on this slide, which is TPIROS. My DMs are open. So if you have any questions about anything that we discussed as part of this workshop or anything else related to web development, please feel free to contact me on Twitter, and I'll do my best to get back to you and help you out. Okay, so people are asking about the recording of the session. So I know that the session is recorded. I'm not sure if any of the conference organizers are around to answer that question. I'm sure there's going to be a way where they're going to email it to you or share it with you. I'm not sure about that, unfortunately. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about Gatsby, of course, and we're going to take Gatsby and create an e-commerce application. We're going to spice up that e-commerce application using a couple of APIs because we are in the realm of the Jamstack, right? So JavaScript APIs and markup. So we're going to be utilizing a static site generator for the markup, and we're going to also be utilizing the A component, the API component from the Jamstack. Because essentially, if you think about this, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Jamstack or whether you saw some introductory talks, but the whole idea behind the Jamstack is that you want to pre-render some static pages, right? And those pages will be placed on a hosting provider or Netlify, Vercel, Gatsby Cloud somewhere, or Amplify even for AWS. And in order to make those static pages, those static sites become dynamic, you need to utilize APIs. And as part of this workshop, we're going to be utilizing 2 APIs, a Cloudinary API and a Snipcart API, and we're going to be doing some very cool stuff. Hopefully you will enjoy that. So for people, hi Tamas, you're the best. Thank you. I'm going to blush if I get messages like that. For those of you new to Gatsby, okay, so there were a couple of people who are new to Gatsby. So Gatsby is a React-based static site generator. So very simply put, and I think they don't like to be called a static site generator, but I'm just trying to keep things simple here. So what it means is that if you are a React developer, if you know the React programming language, you can take that existing knowledge and apply all of that using Gatsby. And with Gatsby, what you do, you just create pages, you create components, just as you would create a component using a React application, and then you execute a command. Gatsby takes a look at your pages and your components and all the logic that you created, and it's going to generate static HTML pages. And what I mean by these static HTML pages is that you're going to be getting HTML pages which will contain all the data that is needed to display a product, for example, right? So it's not going to make any queries or any changes in the page. Everything is going to be in that in an HTML page. Furthermore, again, I'm going to reiterate that if you're an expert or you're familiar with Gatsby, then this is going to be somewhat boring, but please bear with me. So Gatsby also uses GraphQL. Now, if you don't know what GraphQL is, very simply put, it's a query language for APIs. I wrote a couple of blog posts about it. I'm sure you can find lots of videos about GraphQL, so have a look at that as well, because it is going to be very important that you understand what GraphQL does or what GraphQL is if you want to truly leverage the capabilities of Gatsby. So, and I'm going to show you an example on, of course, on how to use GraphQL in Gatsby. Furthermore, Gatsby has additional things like source and transformer plugins. Okay, Gatsby has a vast plugin ecosystem where the people who created Gatsby also publish what they call official plugins, but anyone can also publish their own plugins, right? So there's a plugin for Google Analytics, there's a plugin for transforming markdown files to HTML syntax. There's thousands of plugins available, and I'm going to show you where you can find those. Now, there's a bunch of configuration files as well, which in this sort of introduction to Gatsby in 10 minutes section of this workshop, I want you to be familiar with GatsbyConf and Gatsby node. So GatsbyConf is really the heart of every Gatsby project that you can create. It's the place where you configure how Gatsby should work. It's the place where you specify and configure your plugins. It's just a place that you're going to be working with quite a lot if you use Gatsby. Gatsby node is another important file because Gatsby node basically drives how Gatsby should generate those static sites. And we're going to take a look at an example of that as well. There's one more config file, or maybe two, but there's one more that we will be using, which is Gatsby browser. That's my demo project that I'm going to show you in just a moment uses Tailwind CSS, and I use this Gatsby browser file to tell Gatsby where my CSS files are. Okay, right. So what are we going to be building? So we're going to be building this application where we're going to be using Gatsby for our static site generation. We're going to be using two APIs, as I said before, a snip cart API. And for those of you who are not familiar with snip cart, it is an e-commerce platform. It basically gives you an entire e-commerce checkout flow. So you need to register. They have a free tier, of course. We're going to implement their APIs in the Gatsby, and then we're going to see how you can actually, build a checkout flow using snip cart. And then we will be using cloudinary to display e-commerce images, or product images, that is, right? So the products that we're trying to sell will be uploaded to cloudinary and served from there for a very specific reason, and I'm going to show you that as well. If time permits, we're going to take a look at deployment as well. As I said, there are multiple deployment platforms available for applications created using Gatsby or created within the Jamstack. Netlify is one, there's Vercel, Gatsby Cloud, AWS Amplify. It's up to you which one you want to use, right? If you're not familiar with any of these, go ahead, try out all of them, see which one works the best for you, and then just take it from there. Right, so with that, this is the URL that I'm going to try and copy in the chat. So that you can just copy paste that. That is going to be the final version of the project that we're going to be building, right? So that's the complete application. Now, what I can't remember though, and I should have checked that before. Yeah, it's private. Yeah, sorry, that's exactly what I wanted to check. Give me 1 second. I forgot to make it public. Okay, GatsbyConf, yes, it is in fact private. So let's make this change visibility, make public. And of course, I need to enter my passwords. Okay, try it now. So it should be public. Perfect. I've also seen a question from Jorge. I hear a lot about static pages, static site generators, etc. Can you give a quick example of what Gatsby would not, where Gatsby would not be a good fit for that it isn't a static site? Maybe if you wanted to build a cloud platform. Okay, so examples where the Jamstack is, or generally speaking, static site generators are not good. The thing is, I think I've read an article where I'm forgetting that they had a discussion in that article about what fits the Jamstack and what doesn't fit the Jamstack, and I forgot what does not fit the Jamstack. There are a lot of use cases, because when I say static pages, I don't actually mean 100% static HTML. You can always spice up your HTML or your static pages with APIs, right? So for example, I could add Auth0 and the Auth0 SDKs to my static application and achieve, login, authentication, authorization features. I could add a, what are they called, a FormSpree SDK to my static page. Then I will have sort of email sending capabilities and sign up features, right? So don't think that these static pages are 100% static, right? They have dynamic components. They can be dynamic. They can be as dynamic as you want. Plus, you could also create, a serverless function, and you could utilize that serverless function to, reach out to a number of SDKs and do something very dynamic. If I have 500 plus items, should I statically load or dynamically load their images on the collection page? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. So Gatsby offers out of the box an image component called Gatsby Image, which behind the scenes uses the Sharp plugin. But we're going to get to that, and we're going to talk about that. Also, there are sites, for example, one very, very classic example of a, not written with Gatsby, but it's using another static site generator, and it's still, a Jamstack site, Smashing Magazine. So Smashing Magazine is, they have, a blog, obviously. They have a store where you can purchase books. I think they have a job board. They run conferences. So all of that is essentially, all of these pages that they have are Jamstack pages, right? And they have a lot of articles, and they have static site generation and other stuff. Okay, sorry, Steve, I kind of missed where that error is coming from. Is that something? I think. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Sorry, I just got stuck with these messages. Right, so let me show you the, where is it? So this is what we're going to be working with. Okay, so for those of you new to Gatsby, what I've done, I do recommend that you go to Gatsby's website, read the docs. They're really good. I did install the Gatsby CLI, which meant that I could create a site using the Gatsby new command. So I created it using this command that you see here. So Gatsby new would create a new project. You give a name for that project, and you can also point to a starter. And as you can see, the starter is the official Hello World starter from Gatsby. So what I did was, executed this command. It essentially cloned this repository and initiated this project for me. Now, I did add additional things to this project, at least this very basic version of it. I added Tailwind CSS. There are, again, very good, sorry, someone is saying that the resolution is poor. Can you increase the font? Okay, so I'm going to increase the font. So instead of 5, let's do 6 times zoom. Is this better now? Yes. Okay, perfect. So where was I? Yes, Tailwind CSS. So I added Tailwind CSS to this project. The reason why I did this is because I just like to use Tailwind CSS. Again, if you're not sure how to sort of work with Tailwind, you can go and check the Gatsby docs. They actually have a dedicated section on how to set up Gatsby with Tailwind CSS, okay? Right. Lots of messages. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry if I'm going to miss questions, but I just see messages coming in a minute, but I'll try to do my best. Okay, so again, for those of you new to Gatsby, I mentioned that Gatsby is based on React, right? Now, one thing that I really find interesting for people that are new to Gatsby is to figure out how to do routing, right? Because, you know, doing routing in React can be tricky. You know, it's not necessarily easy at times, but with Gatsby, it's really, really simple. So what I have here, we have the source folder. And if you just instantiate a project using Gatsby new, you will just get a pages folder, and in that pages folder, you will get an index.js. So essentially, the content of index.js, in my case, is just a simple React component, right? This is going to translate to the index page of my site. Okay, this is essentially the root of our application. Now, if I do Gatsby develop, which again, you need to have the Gatsby CLI installed in order to be able to execute Gatsby develop. If you want to do, you can also do npm run develop. It's going to be exactly the same. So if I run npm run develop, you will see that it actually executes Gatsby develop behind the scenes. Now, the way routing works in Gatsby is that every JavaScript file that you place into the pages folder will become its own root, okay? So if I add, say, an about.js into the pages folder, that is going to allow me to go to mysite.com/about, okay? Also, if you put folders in here, so if I put a folder under the pages folder and I call it test, and in that test folder, I create a file called about.js, then I will have access to mysite.com/ I forgot what I said, /test/about.js, right? So essentially the content of the pages folder is going to be driving how your routing is going to look like in Gatsby. Now, additional things that you can do, because again, remember, we are in React mode, right? This is, again, simple React stuff here. I created a components folder, and inside this components folder, you can create any number of components that you want. These are, you know, classic components that you would be reusing, stuff like a navigation, footer, header, and layout is a very interesting one. So with the layout component, and I'm going to open that. So what I've done with the layout component, I created, let's just forget that this thing exists here. I created the overall layout of my application, right? Now the layout component accepts children, which are all the child nodes that I want to utilize. So in other words, this is, think of it as the skeleton of the application, and then all the content, so all the, you know, the content of the index page, the content of additional pages that we're going to be creating would be placed where you see the children variable being evaluated here in this, you know, in line 21. Okay. Now, my Gatsby develop command has finished to run. And what I would like you to notice, and again, this is for people who are new to Gatsby, what I would like you to notice are two sort of pages here, or two links that I can access. One is localhost 8000, and the other one is localhost 8000 /triple_ GraphQL. So let's open localhost 8000 in our browsers. So I'm going to do new window and bring this window up here and do localhost 8000. Okay, so zoom in a little bit. And this is, just the skeleton that I created, right? It's a home page with some welcome message. There's a footer with, the hypothetical company name and some credentials. And then there's a link to products. But of course, that is going to return a 404 because we haven't implemented yet, right? Because this is where we're going to get started. Now, a couple of things. Again, for people who are new to Gatsby, where do I get the information in the footer, for example? If I go back to my code here, you may have noticed that inside my layout, I'm executing a query here. So for those of you who are new to GraphQL, this is a GraphQL query. And what Gatsby allows me to do is to specify some metadata inside my Gatsby config file. So this is, remember, the file that we mentioned that is going to be very, very important for us. So this is GatsbyConfig.js. And I have site metadata here, and I added the title, the description, the author, and the copyright date, which always returns the current full year. And then what I can do anywhere inside Gatsby, I can actually utilize GraphQL queries to query for this content. Okay, so what I have here is, and probably it's better if I open up these side by side so that it's more visible. So I have a GraphQL query where I'm querying for the site metadata, title, author, and copyright date. And you notice that that actually matches the JSON structure that I've specified inside my Gatsby config. So how do I know that I can query for this? Well, this is where the second URL becomes important, because what Gatsby allows us to do is to go to this URL and explore what we can query for via GraphQL. It, in fact, gives us this GraphQL Explorer interface where I run a query before, which is not really important, but it allows you to query for stuff. So for example, we can query for site data, and within the site data, we have the site metadata, and we could query for the author and the description. We hit play, and then we get the result in here. So if at any point in time you want to query something inside Gatsby, and we're going to be adding more stuff here, which we're going to be querying. But for now, we can just query the metadata. And if you want to verify, how the exact query should look like, what data it returns, you're not sure, you can always utilize this interface and write queries and test your queries out here, and just make sure that the result is the results that you want to see inside your application. So once I execute a query, and I should also mention that there are two types of queries, but I'm not going to get into that, that you can do in Gatsby in terms of GraphQL queries. There are static queries, and there are what they refer to as page queries. Static queries, as the name suggests, are static, meaning that you can't pass in any values to it, right? You can't pass in a variable to your GraphQL query. The other type of queries are the page queries that accept parameters. Again, if you're new to GraphQL, do look up, how to add parameters to GraphQL queries, why they are important, how they work. If you are familiar with GraphQL, then know that you can do static queries or dynamic page queries inside Gatsby. Okay, so this is the skeleton of our application. Now we are going to start developing our application. Now there's going to be a bunch of things that we're going to be adding in here. Let me just put the layout back. In fact, let me just close all of these. And don't save. Okay. Now, what we would like to do, so there's a question in here. Do you need a snipcart API to code along? Yes, you do. We're going to be adding the snipcart API, but we're going to get to that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to do that together. Okay, so we had a look in our browser or at least you saw it in my browser, that we have the home page. And when we click on products, nothing happens, right? So if I move these side by side, which hopefully is going to work. Yep. So if I click on products, I get 404. And the reason for that is, I think if you paid attention, you know why this is happening. That is because we don't have anything inside the pages folder indicating a product file or a products.file. So Gatsby doesn't know what to load because it needs a file to fulfill that root request. So in light of that, what we're going to do is add a file in here. Called products.js, okay? So products.js is going to be the place where we're going to be listing all the products that we have. Now we're going to keep things simple. We're going to have about 4 or 5 products, right? So we're not going to go overboard with this. Now, because we are, again, remember in React world, what we can do is just create a React component, right? So we can say products page, and then we can build up, any sort of components that we want, and then we need to do an export default products page. Okay. Someone's asking, so snip cart is basically just like cart functionality or commerce.js. I'm not familiar with commerce.js, but it will give you cart functionality, checkout, customization for the checkout, payments, a lot of stuff. So that's why I like to call it, I don't know what the official tagline is, but I like to call them as like a complete checkout solution. I think that very well sort of describes what they are. Carlo is asking, do you no longer need to directly import React? Yes, you do. I'm just, building up my page. Anna Maria, can we do the API key first so we can run this solution? I'm going to say no to that. I'm sorry. The reason, because I don't want to jump around between people running the final solution, people paying attention. So let's just go through the whole thing. But as Jorge is saying, you can go to snipcart.com, create an account, and then under the account, you will be getting a sort of API key, which you can copy, and that should be just fine. Carlo, no worries. Right, so yes, let's do that. Import React from React. Okay. That's how our page looks like. So now that we that we have that, I'm going to also import layout, because I created, as I said, the skeleton of this application, which includes the navigation bar, the footer, etc. So I'm just going to import that from components layout. And what we can do here is effectively return layout, and then we can just say, I don't know, for now, product list. Okay, and save this. And hopefully now we need to wait for this rebuild to happen. Okay, and if I click on products, what did I forget to do? Nothing. Okay, so we do now have a text product list as list. Excuse me. So this is the place where we're going to be displaying our products. Okay. For those of you new to Gatsby, you now see how I just added a new JavaScript file and the routing automatically picked it up. Also, if you're curious as to how come I could load the products root by clicking on the products menu item, you need to open header.js. And I could have, separated out the navigation from my header, but I didn't. I just put everything inside the header. But if you take a look at the navigation component in here, or the navigation element in here, you will see that there is a link. Where is it? There are a bunch of links. There we go. So there's a link component, which is actually a component that comes built in with Gatsby. So you need to import that as well. So that's why in line 3, I have import link from Gatsby. If you import that, you can just call the to property on it, and you specify the route that you want to load. Okay, so because I added a file called products.js, I can link to /products, and clicking on this will automatically load that particular page into the browser. Okay, so just to show that to you as well. Okay, so product list. Now there are a bunch of ways that you can add data to Gatsby or to any Jamstack application for that matter, or to any static site generator. You could use a headless CMS, right? So headless CMS is different from a traditional CMS in a sense that I think everyone knows WordPress, right? WordPress is the, almost the equivalent term of saying a CMS. If you think about WordPress, they're getting better now, but if you think about WordPress 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they gave you a front-end interface and the back-end interface as well, and they were tightly coupled, right? In other words, there was no easy way where you could separate the back-end portion of your WordPress instance and the front-end portion of your WordPress instance. This was one big monolithic application. You could always apply themes to it, which a lot of people did, but that didn't mean that you can still separate the backend from the front end. So that's a classic CMS. A headless CMS, which became a popular term in the Jamstack. A headless CMS is called headless because you're chopping the head of your CMS. So in other words, you basically remove the front end component of your CMS. So most of these, or probably all of these headless CMS providers, they give you a backend, which then you can either hook up with GitHub, or you can hook it up with a database, or it doesn't matter. Somewhere they will store the data. Some of them give you, user management. So all these sort of backend capabilities that you would expect a CMS to have, but all of them are agnostic to how you want to display the data that you store in that CMS. Okay, so one idea would be, and this is maybe as a homework, investigate what headless CMSs are out there. I have used quite a lot of them. I used, just to throw a couple at you, Strappy, Cosmic, Contentful, Storyblock, Sanity. So I used quite a lot, right? Any of these would be great. There's also like what is it called, Tina CMS. There's lots out there that you can use. So one idea is to utilize a headless CMS to store your products, okay? And that is probably useful if you want to have, maybe you have an entire team who would like to manage products, right? And then they would be logging into the CMS, updating stuff, etc. Now, if you want to, you can also just store product information inside files, inside markdown files. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing here, because I think, it's a very interesting thing that you can do that, and it's very easy to manage as well. So inside Gatsby, we're going to be using a couple of plugins that will enable us to store products as markdown files. Now, I think I promised to you that we will visit the Gatsby plugins. So there's a page dedicated to all the plugins that you can use with Gatsby. As I said, it's a large number. I'll zoom in a little bit for you. So there's a large number of plugins available. So, more than 2,600 plugins. And you will find plugins here that will do amazing things. One example is, of course, going to be the snip card plugin, or one of these, which we're going to be using. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are two plugins that we're going to be using first time around, which is going to be the Gatsby source file system plugin, which, as you can see, there's a description. So every plugin is very well documented. There's a description of it. You can take a look at usage instructions. You can take a look at examples on how to use that, what options you can add, etc., etc., etc. There's a very good question from Rick. Let me answer that in just a second. So Gatsby source file system is essentially a plugin that allows you to read files from your file system and then serve it up as file nodes inside Gatsby. So file nodes would be things that you could query via GraphQL. And because we're going to be querying for markdown files, the other plugin that we're going to be using is called Gatsby Transformer Remark, I think, which uses, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Remark, or is it Remark or Remark.js? I'm not sure. But Remark is okay, I should take a look at it. Remark is a JavaScript library that allows you to take markdown files and process them. In other words, what we're going to be doing is taking markdown content and generating HTML content from that. Okay, so Rick was asking, in the event that you aren't using Markdown for content, would you still use GraphQL to query some other CMS? Yes and no. So first of all, if the headless CMS or the CMS of your choice, where's the plugin page, has a plugin, then probably you can. So for example, let's say you want to do Contentful. Pretty sure there's a Contentful plugin. Gatsby source Contentful. And now this is, okay, so source plugin for pulling content types, entries, or sets into Gatsby from Contentful. It creates links between entities so they can be queried using GraphQL. Okay, so Rick, you can do that. If you're a fan of GraphQL, then there are also some headless CMSs out there which allow you to directly query them using GraphQL. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, Strappy is one of them, where you can install a plugin for Strappy, and then the Strappy system will be open for querying, or it will allow you to query the content found inside Strappy via GraphQL from anywhere, pretty much. But as you see, here's an example, Contentful creates the nodes, you can query them from GraphQL. Other people are saying, Dato CMS and others. I'm sure there are other examples that you can use. Laurie, do you recommend starting with the default starter that includes these basic plugins? I think the default starter, I think it's the Hello World starter, I think that's the one that you mean. It has a bunch, I can't remember what it has, but I think it has some plugins enabled. Yeah, so those should be good enough. Right, so we established that we're going to be using these two plugins. Now, how do we install these plugins? Well, it's going to be very, very simple. We're going to go back to my code editor right here, open up a new terminal window. And essentially, we're just going to say install, I have npm, I use npm. If you use yarn, then you can use yarn. So I can do npm I, and then just specify the plugins that I want to install. So Gatsby source file system was one, and the other one was Gatsby Transformer Remark. Okay, and these are going to install now. A bunch of questions which apply to the CMS. Okay, sorry, Paul says products can it be the CMS? Patrick, I'm sorry, not sure. I only used Stripe as a payment platform. I haven't seen or used that product feature yet. Gatsby. Okay, what did I do? Gatsby source file. What am I doing? Could not resolve. What is happening here? Oh, I think, wait. JSON file. I may have, no, it's not part of that. Let me just clear everything because I don't know what I've done here before this workshop. Lorenzo is saying if you simply use Gatsby init, it will ask which plugins extensions you want to install. Okay, so that's another good call. All right, so I'm just going to clear things up here a little bit. Are there any plugins for Stripe? I'm pretty sure. There's also a video from Jason Langtorf. I think he's done something with Stripe and the Jamstack, but here's Gatsby source Stripe, Gatsby Stripe checkout button for plans, Gatsby theme Stripe. So there's lots of Stripe stuff. So basically, let me just give you this link in the chat, which is the plugin page, gatsbyjs.com/plugins. And then you can browse all the thousands of plugins that are available on Gatsby. Right, so where are we? Okay, so I'm going to do an npm I just to install these dependencies as we try to add those two files. So while stuff is installing, let's not waste time. Let's think about how we're going to add our content. So as I said, if you want to utilize CMS, by all means do that. We're going to go down the slightly simpler route because I didn't want to, everyone to register for CMS and then, figure out how it works. So we're just going to be adding content as markdown files. Now, everything would live inside the source folder. So we have components, we have CSS and pages in here. So what I'm going to do is add a new folder. I'm going to call that content. And inside the content folder, I'm going to create a new file. And I'm just going to copy the content for that file because I have that on my other screen. Let's call this a baseball-MB. So just a simple markdown file. And this is going to be its content. Now, every image that every product that we're going to be using has an image, and the images I took from Unsplash. Okay, so the comments that you see in the repository as well are just the credits for the Unsplash creators. So this is how our product is going to look like. Now, you see the product description here, which has this double hash symbol, which is clearly an H2 element that is going to translate to an H2 element in here. Then you see, a paragraph. It's just, is a simple description of the product. And you also see this entire section here separated with these 3 dashes. Now, this is, consider this as metadata for the markdown file. Now, this has names like front matter, and the format that is being used here is called YAML, which is YAML, which is short for yet another markup language, I think. But essentially, it contains metadata about the markdown file. Now, what is the stuff that we have in here? Let's just focus on the name. So, we have a product name, we have a price, and then we have an ID for our product. In this case, this is product or prod-2. Now, there are some additional things in here. We don't need to know what this is for now. We're going to get to that, especially the template key and this public ID and product image bits. And this is how we can essentially create a product. Now, I could have added any other piece of information in here. I could have added any other markdown content in here. I could have added italics and bold and other stuff in here. As I said, I'm just going to keep things simple for now. And this is essentially one product done. This is a product that is now ready, and we now need to figure out a way how to display this product for our end users. And I don't know why my npm install is so slow, but we need to wait for that. So let me check. Question. So Armando is asking, what about if I do not want to create my e-commerce site? Restart is like Snipcart or Netlify. There are a bunch of other APIs that you could use. You don't need to use Snipcart. You can use Shopify. You don't need to use Netlify. You can use whatever else you want. So it's completely fine. Are you sourcing from Shopify or some CMS? Vishang, no, I'm not. As I said, we're going to be sourcing data from local files for now. There's WooCommerce as well, correct? There's also a headless CMS view storefront, something similar. There are a bunch of examples out there. Creating an e-commerce site using Gatsby, okay, it's good, but can you tell me what type of e-commerce or size? So if you have a smaller, e-commerce platform, then I think it makes sense to use, a file-based product system. I think that's, don't need to necessarily complicate stuff. As I said, if you have maybe thousands of products and you have, I don't know, 10 people, doing updates to those products, then it makes sense to hook Gatsby up with a CMS and then store your products inside the CMS. Now, the way how Gatsby is going to retrieve the products, for Gatsby, it doesn't matter if it's going to be in a file or coming from a CMS, because we are always going to be using the GraphQL interface to query for the data itself. Okay, so in that sense, it doesn't matter if I'm querying for files that are local or if I'm querying for data coming from a CMS, because in terms of Gatsby will just execute a GraphQL statement and will pull the data in regardless of where the data is, can be found. Okay, so Gatsby source file system, Gatsby transformer remark. If this doesn't work, then I'm going to change to my other editor. Fahad, does querying data from CMS increase performance? Performance of what exactly? Unable to resolve dependency tree. Why is this? This is so typical, isn't it? Gatsby source. Maybe I'm. It's not even a typo, is it? Okay, if someone has seen this error before, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to ignore this and change to my complete solution. Is it not the Gatsby 3 giving you an issue? I haven't seen this, but I guess maybe. So back up. This goes away. This comes here. And our problems are now gone. Okay, so here's our baseball caps, the problem solved. So this is the baseball cap here. And I changed to the same code that you have on GitHub. I'm sorry, I don't want to waste time in trying to debug stuff and waste precious time with that. So, right, so we have the product. So now we need to figure out a way how we can query this product using GraphQL and using Gatsby. And let's assume that I've successfully managed to install both of these plugins that you saw before. So I installed Gatsby Transformer Remark and I installed Gatsby Source File System. And as you can see, I added those to the plugins array in Gatsby config. So it's not only enough to install the plugins, it's also very crucial that you tell Gatsby to use these actual plugins. And for Gatsby Transformer Remark, I haven't added any special options, but as you can see for Gatsby Source File System, I'm actually pointing to the place where my products are going to live, which is inside the content folder. Now, inside the content folder, I do have a products folder, and inside that I have 1, 2, 3, and 4 products. Okay, all of these are in a markdown format. So what we're going to do now is run Gatsby develop. And because we are now using the Gatsby source file system, we should be able to query the contents. I forgot to stop that other instance. One sec. There we go. Right. So we should be able to run GraphQL statements against the markdown files that we have. So the first way that we can do to test this is going to be using the GraphQL Explorer, and we're going to take a look at, what is the content that we can query for. Fahad, I'm wondering if I use cloudinary to render Gatsby images with GraphQL, we give them better performance versus storing them locally. We're going to talk about that, but yes, you will get a much better performance, and I'm going to tell you why that is. Armando, can I make my own e-commerce site not using APIs and programming my own components in Gatsby? Potentially, but it would be an awful lot of work, I suppose. Maybe I'm jumping ahead. How would we keep track of inventory of each product? So that's a question from Anna Maria. So keeping the inventory. So first of all, Snipcart has features. So the e-commerce providers, most of them have options to keep track of your inventory. Okay, Snipcart has it. I'm pretty sure Shopify and all the others would have it as well. So we are not going to do that in here because we are storing that we will store that here as a piece of information. But you have an option. Either you store all the product information in your e-commerce platform, maybe in Shopify, and then you can query for the data, which will also include the inventory for your products. That's one thing. Or if you use a CMS, inside the CMS, you could also have a field other than the name and the image and the description of the product, which is the inventory. Now, there's a very interesting thing that you can do in the Jamstack, because I heard this argument before where people say, if you run into Jamstack, you pre-render all your HTML pages, which means that let's say you have 10 baseball caps that you have available. Now I purchase one. How do you make sure that now there's only 9 left? Okay, how can you do that? Because pre-rendering the site again will take some time. Now, there are, and I'm trying to answer way too many things at the same time. So there are a bunch of ways that you can do this. First of all, there are some static site generators that are working on what is called incremental build. So they will only rebuild the files where change was detected, right? So in that sense, if you sell something, the inventory goes down, that particular file, that particular product page would need to be pre-rendered. So the static site generator is not going to pre-render everything, it's just going to pre-render that one thing. That's coming. There are some other ways that you can do this, which is, and there's a very good, I'm going to share a resource with you towards the end of this workshop where I created a video on this. But there's also, I think, and I'm not sure if it's a video or an article from Phil Hawksworth from Netlify, which is a sort of fallback mechanism. And that's very, very typical for Jamstack sites as well. So essentially what happens is there's a change in a content that is dynamic, such as your inventory. So what you would do is that if you deduce the inventory using your CMS or your e-commerce platform, and that should trigger a build. Now, while the build is happening, as opposed to showing the static page for that product, what you do, you show a sort of fallback API page, which is a fully dynamic page, and you keep on showing that page until you get a signal from your static site generator that the pre-rendering and the deployment is now complete. In that case, you can just show the product page again via the static page, because it will now have the reduced inventory, if that makes sense. I'm hoping it makes sense, right? So it's like an API fallback until the new inventory numbers are pre-generated to static HTML again, and then you just switch things around. And it's really easy. It's easier than I'm probably explaining this to you. Okay, thank you. A bit. Okay, so messages keep on scrolling. So API fallback plus incremental build. My question, thank you. So the fallback would just be slower to load, but have the updated inventory. So I tell you what, if there's time, I'm going to show you. First of all, I'm going to link to a resource to you where you can take a look at how this is done. I'm also going to show that to you in code. Okay, let's get back to that if we have time at the end. But I would definitely share the resource with you. Okay. Where was I? Yes, GraphQL. Okay, so let's open the GraphQL interface that we have here. Cool. And so probably you don't notice, but since we added the remark plugin, this all markdown remark and markdown remark entries got added to this Explorer window here. So what we can do is click on all markdown remark, click on edges node, and notice the section here that says from meta. So I mentioned that the metadata section that you saw inside the markdown files is what we would refer to as from meta. So if I extend this, I now see the ID, the name, and the price of my product. So if I hit play, or my products, because what I failed to tell you before, and again, for people who are familiar with Gatsby would know this, people who are new to Gatsby would not know this, but notice that all the things that you can query for, there's a section that starts with all, so all directory, all file, all site, yada, 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 and then you get the sort of singular form of those, like file, markdown, remark, etc. So if you query for, or if you expand all markdown remark, and then you query for all the names and the prices, it will list all the markdown file contents, and it will list all the IDs, the names, and the prices. So here are all our products, right? So we have a baseball cap, which is $29.99, a jumper, which is $30, jeans, shoes, and these are the 4 products that we have. I could also check the HTML in here. And this is the rendered HTML. Okay, so there's the H2 element, which I mentioned. Here's the paragraph and some other stuff. And where it was appropriate, I also added as a comment the credit to Unsplash. So that means that we now have a way to access information about our products inside Gatsby via GraphQL, which also means that we should be able to execute a query very similar to this inside our application, and then be able to display the result. So if I change to my editor, remember I switched to the final version of the app, so this is all written. So I'm just going to go through that with you now. And let's do that part by part or section by section. Okay, so we have a products page. Again, this is just a standard component. And I'm executing a page query where I say, all markdown remark edges node. Let's ignore this for a minute. We query for from meta, name, price, and a product image. Now I wanted to do this separately, so let's just ignore the product image for now. Okay, so I'm just querying for the name and the price. So that means that I have this query, and if I have that query, I can extract the result inside my products page component. Okay, so I'm accessing the edges. And if you remember, if I go back to this in here, I'm accessing edges here. So edges should return me an array of objects with this information, or the information that I queried for. And in fact, I can iterate through all the products, extract the node, and let's just ignore the image and all the other stuff here. In fact, let me just get rid of that for now. And what I do, I print out the name, the price of the product inside my layout. So again, I have my layout that I created, I have the skeleton, and inside that I just iterate through all these products. So if I hit save, I hope I didn't break anything with my commenting. And let's go to the browser. Where is that? Right here. Products, and here we are, just side by side, right? So we have the map here, and these are the products that we have, okay? So we have the baseball cap, so we have all the names of the products and all the prices of these products. Now, these are clickable already, and the reason why they are clickable is because I again imported the link and I added this thing. Now, here's the question, right? We established that JavaScript files that I place inside the pages folder will become essentially an HTML page. They will become a root, right? So do I need to now create a baseball cap, a jumper, a jeans, and a shoes root, and then add those as JavaScript files? Well, of course, I don't have to do that because that would be rather silly of me. What we can do, we can create what I think Gatsby officially refers to this as well, or at least this is how I call it, a template file. And we can specify the template file to display any product that we send to it. So if we send the baseball cap, we just specify how the product template should look like. So essentially how we want to display a single product item. We specify all the HTML and all the stuff that we want. And if I click on the baseball cap is going to be loaded into that template file. If I click on the shoes are going to be loaded into that template file. And this is where things will get tricky. So again, if you're new to Gatsby, I'll try to explain this as much as I can in a way that you can understand it. If you are familiar with Gatsby already, then you will know what's going to happen here. And this is where we're also going to become familiar with the Gatsby node.js file. I'm sorry, Gatsby node.js file. And this file, if you recall from the presentation in the beginning, this file is also useful for telling Gatsby how to generate the static pages for dynamic content. So what we have here, all these products and the individual product listing pages are dynamic, because if I add 6 more products, I want those 6 additional products to be statically rendered for me as well. So using Gatsby Node, we can do just that. And inside this Gatsby Node file, let me just make this slightly larger for you. Inside this file, there's going to be 2 things that are going to be happening. We have 2 functions. One is called onCreateNode, and the other one is called createPages. Now, I think createPages is kind of going to make sense what it does. It's going to help us build a page essentially. Also for static generation, also for dynamically loading products. On create node is going to create a sort of new field for us, a new queryable GraphQL content for us, which we can leverage inside create pages and throughout our application. I'm just trying to think which one to start with. Let me just see this. Let's start with this one, create node. So with create node, I can create essentially custom fields that you can query for inside Gatsby using GraphQL. And what I say here is that if my node's internal type is a markdown remark, so in other words, if the node that I'm looking at is a markdown file, I want to create a node field. And I want to give it a name, and the name is going to be slug. It's going to be a node, and it is going to have a value. And the value is going to be the path for the markdown file. Because I've added this already, you can just go to the GraphQL Explorer and take a look at, what is this field? So first of all, where are we? All markdown remark. So when I went into front meta and I asked for the ID, the name, and the price, which I'm going to uncheck, and I asked for the HTML, notice that we have this expandable field here called fields. And inside fields, you will see slug, which is exactly the name of the field, of the field that I created. So if I check this, theoretically, the value of that slug field should be the path for the markdown file. So if I hit run, I in fact get /products baseball cap, /products jumper, jeans, and shoes. So why did I do this? I did this because now I will have a way to link to the individual products, right? Because otherwise, if you think about it, there was no other way for me to be able to say that if I'm in the product listing page, to be able to click on the baseball cap and to be able to retrieve the data for the baseball cap, or to open the file for the baseball cap, right? There's no relation between what you see here and what I wanted to open. But now, because I created this custom value, I can feed that into the link component for Gatsby. That's one thing, right? So probably you can't see that in the stream, but if I hover my mouse over this, the link is actually localhost 8000 /products/baseball-cap. Okay, so if I were to click on it, the baseball cap product information page would open. But we need one more thing to achieve that. We need to specify a template that is going to be that we can use to display that product information. So let's close this. And I'm going to come back to these create pages in just a second. So you will see, Magdalena Capsata, there's a question. So if the product display is based on the type of the product, you will have to have different templates, or the logic will go into that one template. Sorry, what do you mean by that? So the product display is based on the type of the product. So the product display is not based on the type of the product. It's based on the type of the file that I store it in. So are you saying that what if you have products in Markdown and maybe in Contentful? Then you would create another if statement, and you would say if, and I'm just making this up now, right? So you would do nodes.internal.type equals to Contentful node, or something else, and then you just create a new, maybe you can create a new node field. It's then up to you how you want to create these fields, or what data you want to put into these fields. Okay, so templates. Notice I have a folder here called templates, and I have a template in here called, or a file in here called product page.js. So if I open this, you will see that there are a bunch of things in here, but there is, again, something that we export default. We call it a product page. And if I expand this, first of all, let's take a look at the page query, because this page query is going to be different from all the page queries and all the GraphQL queries that we've seen so far. For people familiar with GraphQL, you will know what this is. And for people who are new to GraphQL, this is what we discussed at the beginning of this workshop. This is a parameter that we're going to be passing in to this GraphQL query. And notice that instead of using all markdown remark, I'm just querying for markdown remark, and I want to pass in an ID where the ID should be equal to something. So this is the way that, I just laughed at this is the way, Star Wars Mandalorian, doesn't matter, just ignore me. So, so this is the way how you would query for a single product, right? Because if I want to get information, this is the way. Okay, I just unleashed the Mandalorian. I'm sorry, I'm tired. Focus. Right, so we need to specify how to query for individual product data, individual product information, right? We don't need a list of all the products. I want to query for a specific product. When I click on, say, the jumper, I only want to query for that particular product. And in order to be able to do that, what I need to do, I need to pass in an ID, or I need to pass in something to my GraphQL query. In fact, what we can do, and what we will do, is go to our GraphQL Explorer and take a look at how that works, so that you see that visually, and then it's going to be very easy to just take that query and put that into put that query. I've spoken, brilliant. Put that query into Gatsby. So as opposed to using all markdown remark, we just need to say markdown remark. And for those of you who are new to Gatsby, notice these things that are, I don't know if it goes through the, probably does through the share. This is in purple-ish. You can click on these, and these would be filtering criteria. So I can say markdown remark where the ID is equal to something. Type it in here, and this is going to filter stuff down. But let me find an ID first. So let's do all markdown remark, and let's query for all the IDs. Okay, so let's take this ID here. I don't know. I think that's the baseball cap. And let's add this ID in here, and let's go for front matter, name and price. Okay, so what I'm doing here, I'm sort of almost filtering for a particular product by this ID, and I want to return the name and the price of that. See, so this is now only returning a single product for me. Now, you don't need to worry about these IDs because these are internal to Gatsby. So once you know the data that you want, you can just specify the query in this way, where you say where the ID is equal to $ID, and Gatsby will pass in the ID automatically. We're going to take a look at that, how that works. And then I'm just returning, or I'm just querying for the HTML. So this is the transformed HTML from Markdown. I'm getting the ID, name, price, public ID, and I'm getting fields and the slug. And maybe the slug is not even required, but let's just leave it there. Okay, so this is my page query. So this time, the page query has a dynamic component. And if you think about this, this makes sense, because using this template, what we're going to do is when we are going to tell Gatsby to statically generate the HTML pages for us, we're going to tell Gatsby to use this template, iterate through all the products that we have, and this is how Gatsby will be able to pre-render or to generate a static HTML page for each and every single product that we have. Now, inside the product page here, we're going to ignore a bunch of things. Just ignore the hooks and everything else for now. But if you extend the layout, and let's ignore the image as well, what you will get is just a page that is going to just the HTML, where that is going to describe how a single product should look like. Okay, a bunch of questions. How do you get the backtick content to show up with different colors on VS Code? Jorge, sorry, don't know. I don't think I have a special plugin for that. Or maybe I have a GraphQL plugin. Where did the marketplace go? Okay, I don't know. I think I may have the GraphQL plugin, maybe. Lorenzo, Italian people struggle with GraphQL not having backticks. Oh. Brilliant. New to GraphQL, Paul. New to GraphQL, so if you are using Google Tag Manager and you want to pass in page metadata into the data layer, you should transmit that information with the page query as opposed to a site query. I'm going to, what does Google Tag Manager do? So if you're using Google Tag Manager, you wanted to pass in page metadata into the data layer. I think, so think about it this way. Page query is for your pages, and page queries are useful if you want to add a a dynamic component to your query, like a filter, a sort, something similar. If you want to query for for static information, like we've seen that in the very beginning of this workshop, where I added just this static site metadata to my Gatsby config, there's nothing in here that requires a dynamic component for my GraphQL query. So I'm using the static query in Gatsby. Belal, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Question about SEO for e-commerce. An online marketing specialist in X company asked me to have product page details ready by server, somehow SSR request that could be done by pre-render for page components, but he wants that for all products in the store. So with Gatsby, we are going to, so wait, let me just read that again. So yeah, so if we're going to run Gatsby build in hopefully soon, and with that you will get all the product HTML pages ready. Now someone, Lorenzo, thank you for that. Someone is also linking to Helmet, and in fact in this project as well. So if you look at my screen share now, I am using Helmet as well. Products, maybe in the product page. I don't know where I know I'm using it. Maybe not in here. So maybe inside my layout. I know I'm using it somewhere. Inside the header, probably. So what I do inside my header, I specify using the Helmet, the title. So if you're not familiar with Helmet, Bilal, it's called React-Helmet, and it is a React plugin library, which allows you to specify not only the title, but generally speaking, what would go into the head section of your HTML. So all the meta information, titles, etc. Now, what you could do, and he wants HTML with content of product details. Okay, so below we're going to get to that. Okay, we're going to get HTML for every single product generated. Okay, so just bear with me. And you know how, perfect. Okay. Where was I? Product template. Product template. Okay, let me just gather up my thoughts and drink a little bit, but I think I know what I'm going to talk about next. We need to get to the snip card component as well. Reason. So let me just talk about displaying images, because there was at least one question. Ahmed, what do you use for global state management? I don't use global state management in this particular project, Ahmed. So there were at least one question, if not two, about Gatsby images, and then someone said something about cloudinary as well. So let's start to talk about images. Now, when it comes to displaying images inside your Gatsby application, you have quite a number of options, right? You have the Gatsby image component, which has the the fluid and the fixed layouts and other stuff. But generally speaking, or at least personally, one sort of, I don't want to call it an issue, but sort of a negative thing that I experienced with Gatsby image was the fact that if I had 100 images, I had to store all those images inside the source folder, right? And then those images that I would place in there would be parsed and processed using Gatsby, which under the hood uses Sharp, which is a Node.js image transformation optimization tool, right? So it would take all those images inside my folder and it would optimize them. And then if I make one change, it would just run through all those 100 images again, right? So the Gatsby image component is really great. I just don't like the underlying Sharp library for a number of reasons. Now, I did say that I do work for Cloudinary, and I'm very obsessed with images and videos and optimizing them. If and take this with a sort of hint of salt or a pinch of salt. There are situations where using Gatsby image and using the underlying Sharp plugin is good. There are situations when it's just not going to be good, right? So I don't know about what your experience is with media management here on this workshop, but the Sharp plugin would take every single image and you say, generate me a JPEG for all my images, or a PNG, or doesn't matter, and reduce that quality to quality 75. And this is the way how you would, and I said this is the way again, but this is how you would essentially optimize your media assets. And it's a good start, okay? But it's not good, because there are, every single image is different. There are images that could do with more optimization. There are images that could do with less optimization, but there's no way that you can fine tune the Sharp plugin to work in that way. And as I said, also if you store all your image resources locally, Gatsby would need to process this, so your build time could potentially be very, very long, okay? Now, as part of this workshop, what I've done, I actually already uploaded my images to Cloudinary, okay? Now, you can utilize, if I open this real quick here, so if I go to the Gatsby plugin page again, you can utilize, where's the search? Right here. There are two Cloudinary plugins for Gatsby that you can use. One is, or at least that I know of, okay? I see there's more. But there's Transformer Cloudinary and there's a Source Cloudinary. The Source Cloudinary plugin as you can see, it fetches files from Cloudinary into Gatsby. So what it allows you to do is to have your image assets locally. And using this Gatsby Source Cloudinary plugin, this plugin will take all your images and it will upload them to Cloudinary, which means that once they are inside Cloudinary, you don't need to manage them locally because they will be, part of Cloudinary. Now, I probably should have said what Cloudinary is before I get to that. So Cloudinary is a cloud-based image and video optimization, transformation, and delivery platform, which means you can take all your images or videos, upload it to Cloudinary. They give you a URL, and with that URL, you can access those images via the Cloudinary CDN network. So you don't need to have your images stored locally. Furthermore, they have a bunch of options which allow you to optimize your images, right? So you can, for example, automatically reduce the quality of the image. You can automatically, select the appropriate format for your images based on the browser that you're using. All of these are going to enable you to have a very good performance for your images. So that's the source plugin. The Gatsby Transformer Cloudinary plugin is for situations where you already have all your images in Cloudinary. So maybe you had an e-commerce site and you were using Cloudinary, and now you're rebuilding your stuff, and there's no need to upload that to Cloudinary, but you just want to use what you already have in there. In that case, you can use Gatsby Transformer Cloudinary. Furthermore, Gatsby Transformer Cloudinary is compatible with the Gatsby image component. And we're going to talk about that as well. Does Cloudinary have a CDN in Europe or in China? Europe for sure, China as well, I think, but don't quote me on that. I think we do have a CDN in China, but is this recorded or it's too late now? So, okay, I'm just going to say, I'm not sure. I think so. We have it in Europe for sure. So this is the reason why I don't see any images here that I'm using, because again, I didn't want to waste time to do an entire build where you have, maybe 4 or 5 images that I need to process, etc., etc. As I said, feel free to do use that solution. But let me show you one thing. In fact, 2 things. So let's do a test with this image, right? And let me just open my network panel as well and just zoom in a little bit here. So let's assume that we took this picture, we uploaded it to Cloudinary. And what I'm going to do is split my screen. And I'm going to put the URL that I'm using here because I don't think you can see the URL inside the browser. Either descriptions are wrong or you've got them backwards. Ashley, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that refers to. Kritia, can you delete images from a local machine after the images go uploaded into Cloudinary? Most certainly. So once you upload something to Cloudinary, it will be under your Cloudinary account. So we're going to assume that we took an image and we uploaded it to Cloudinary. Whether we uploaded it using the Gatsby plugin or manually, it doesn't matter. And what Cloudinary does, it returns us a URL, which you see here, which we can utilize to access the image inside the browser. And if you take a look at the network panel, just try to move this around a little bit. This is an image of 583 kilobytes. This image is 1000 by 688 pixels in size. And it is going to be, of course, a JPEG, right? Content type JPEG. Now, I don't know how many of you heard of the file format called WebP. So WebP is web picture. It is a file format that Google invented and developed many years ago. And WebP is a very good file format because the algorithm behind it is much newer, and it can compress much better than JPEG. So Chrome is a browser that actually supports that. So if you want to give a very good experience for your users, and it's very, very important for e-commerce platforms that you want your images to load as fast as possible, you want to heavily optimize them, it would make sense to load WebP images for Chrome. But for example, Safari, I think the latest beta of Safari does support WebP, but anything before that does not support WebP. So what do? Well, you need to create a JPEG image for Safari. And in fact, Safari supports the JPEG 2000 standard, which is, again, a newer algorithm for the JPEG encoder. And it helps if you deliver your image using that encoding. But again, now we're talking about 2 images, right, that you need to deliver. Now, let me show you one thing here. I'm just going to append this URL. I'm just going to add fauto to the URL. Fauto is short for automatic formatting. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it to my browser. Remember, we were at, oh wait, I put it in the wrong place. I need to put it here. So the original image was 583 kilobytes, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm loading this image. Again, size is 1000 by 688. That didn't change, but the image size went down to 50 kilobytes. You're probably wondering, okay, what happened? Well, if you take a look at the content header, the content type header even, this is now a WebP image, right? Because we are in Chrome. If I take this same URL, just using fauto, and let me just open a Safari window here. And it's going to open on one of my screens somewhere. Here it is. I load exactly the same URL. I open the network panel for Safari. And notice that the content type is image/JP2. This is JPEG 2000 encoding. So again, the most optimal format for this particular browser. Now, there are additional things I can do. For example, I could do QAuto, which is short for automatic quality. In other words, cloudinary is going to analyze this image and is going to reduce its quality without losing visual fidelity. Losing visual fidelity means that the image is going to be the same for the human eye. But what we're going to see is that the size went down to 32 kilobytes, and we still haven't touched the dimensions of the image, which you can do, of course. And let me just do something cool here. We can do, width 250. And this is now going to, on the server side of Cloudinary, generate a 250 width image, which is now 5 kilobytes. It's a WebP, and it has been QAuto'd, so the automatic quality has been applied. And the reason why I'm showing this to you, and I created this site called Know Your Media, where I actually compare image optimization formats, people using just CSS for transforming the images. And notice that I have Sharp. So what I've done, I have this sample image and I run it through a typical Sharp plugin. And this would be very similar to what Gatsby does to your images. And I shrink down the image to 450 by 600. It's 38 kilobyte in size, but it's still a JPEG. There's no way that I can change this image from using Sharp to be a WebP. I could arbitrarily say that, hey, Gatsby, here are all my JPEGs, generate me a WebP. But then people will open your site using Safari and they will not see any of your images. Okay, so if you're interested, take a look at that. Here's a Cloudinary example. Again, slightly lower in size, and it has the right content type for the right browser. So if I were to open this page in Safari, it would be image JPEG 2000, for example. Okay, and there's some others, like Image Optim is another tool that people use. Photoshop, GIMP is another tool, etc. And you can also, if you click to learn more, show me more, then you will see this is the code that I run. This is super simple, but you could consider this. You could consider the same stuff that Gatsby does behind the scenes. So it says, JPEG quality 75, resize them, put them into a format, process them, and then goodbye. Okay, I'll put this. Can't really tell the difference between images. So I sent you the link. Open it on your page, and you can take a look at that. Someone is saying that the new Gatsby image has a fallback from WebP to JPEG. Maybe that's that's a good thing. In that case, I would still argue that the quality reduction. You say here's 100 images, apply quality 75 to all of them, or please analyze every single image and maybe quality 50 for one, quality 10 to the other, and quality 95 to the third one is a much better approach. Again, as I said, this is not needed, but I think I'm just trying to raise awareness of this here. And as I also said, the Gatsby, where did it go? I had that open before. So one of the cloudinary plugins, the Gatsby Transformer Cloudinary, it can read your images from Cloudinary and put them into the Gatsby image component as well. Right. So why was I talking about this for such a long time? Because we now want to display images for our products. And in fact, let's go back to products and let's open a single product. So inside a single product, what I've done, again, we're assuming that all these images have been uploaded to Cloudinary already, whether using manually in a previous project, using the source plugin, doesn't matter. But what I can do now, I can say product image. And if I use, I'm sorry for jumping around, I just try to build this up logically. So I'm using Gatsby Transformer Cloudinary, which is a plugin that allows you to read images from your Cloudinary account. If you have this plugin installed and enabled, what you can do inside, for example, a markdown file, you can specify a metadata element like I do it here called product image. And as long as you name, or as long as you have this Cloudinary asset data set to be true with some details, the image from Cloudinary is going to be transformed into a node inside Gatsby. And if it's a node inside Gatsby, what we can do with it, we can query for it using GraphqL. Now you're probably wondering why I have original width and height 1 and 1 in here. I found a bug, kind of a bug. If you don't specify this, you can't query the data. So I'm just putting, origin width and height to be 1 and 1. And the public ID is the ID of the image inside Cloudinary, and then the cloud name is the Cloudinary account name that you have with Cloudinary. Okay, so let's take a look at this in the GraphqL Explorer and see what happens in there. So if I open the, this is running, yes. So if I open a, if I go all markdown, remark, nodes, from matter, you will see that I have, the name and the price, and I also have the product image. And if I extend the product image, I now have the usual Gatsby image component related bits, fixed and fluid. So I can do fixed. And if I do source and hit play, then I'm getting the full-blown Cloudinary URLs for all of my images. Okay. Suraj, from the demo they showed yesterday, the new plugin shows you can import a URL directly into static image and set fallbacks for different image outputs to be compliant with different browsers. Okay, so that's good. Thank you for sharing that. Edmund, can CMSs, for example, Contentful, strappy linked with Cloudinary? Yes, Contentful for sure. If you Google for Contentful Cloudinary, we do have a partnership with them, so that will work. And I work with Strappy, and they do have Cloudinary integrations as well, because I have a sample demo of that as well, so it definitely works. Okay, so we now have a way to also display images for our products. And in fact, if I take a look at the products listing page, and I kind of remove this, but what I do, I'm just keeping things simple. I'm just adding an image element. Here's a source, And there's one more thing that I do. If you take a look at the product image, I'm not only asking for the source, but I'm adding transformation options. So via the GraphQL query, I can transform my image, and I'm just adding fauto, qauto, a width and a height, a crop, and gauto is automatic gravity, so it's going to find the most important part of the image when we are doing a crop. So it's going to try to do the crop around the most visible content inside the image, if that makes sense. I'm just going to save this. And let's now take a look at how our product listing is going to look like. All right, so this is how the product listing page now looks like. We do have the images added as well, okay? And the sort of beauty of this is that these images are now heavily optimized, right? So these are now all WebPs, but if I open the same page using Safari, they would be all JPEG 2000s. And if I open it in, I don't know, Internet Explorer, then they would be, you know, JPEG, standard JPEGs. And each and every single image, remember, is analyzed by cloudinary, and then the appropriate reduction in quality is applied on the fly. Well, on server side and then delivered to you by the CDN. So that's one more thing added. So let's take a look at what happens if I click on this. Well, now I get the same image, but I get a different crop of that. And what you see here is essentially the content of the product page template. Okay, so the product page template here contains how the information, or how it contains the data for the individual products. Okay, now the thing that I used here is I'm adding the markdown content to a div, and I dangerously set the inner HTML of that div. Now, this is, you know, otherwise I wouldn't be recommending this to you, but because we are in control of the markdown content, it is relatively safe to call this set inner HTML on an element. And what we set the inner HTML to be is the HTML transformed version of our markdown file. Remember, we are using the Remark plugin in Gatsby, which generates us HTML based on the markdown content, and we just place that HTML inside this div to be part of this div, to be part of this inner HTML of the div. And this is why we now get product description as an H2 element, and then this is the product description that we have here as well. Okay, so we have about an hour, so there's a bunch of other things that I want to show you, of course. Let's go with the cloudinary route for about 5 or 10 minutes more, and then we're going to add the snip cart integration to this, and then we're going to talk about those. Jonathan, how were the slugs generated again inside GatsbyConf? They were inside Gatsby node, and it is on create node. So I'm basically taking a look at all the markdown files. I create a field called slug, and the value of it is the path to the nodes that I'm looking at. So essentially the path for the markdown files. So let me show you something. Let's click on this jumper. The jumper is a special one, and also notice that, again, you know, because we're using cloudinary, the images that you see here inside the product listing and the image that you see here are exactly the same. It's one image with different cropping applied to it, right? So on the product listing page, remember, I do a, I know, 300 by 200 crop, and I do a G auto to automatically find the most prominent part of the image. When I open the image itself, it is still the same image, it's still the same asset behind the scenes, but it has a different crop. And it is only when you open up this jumper that you see this here, which is a color selection, right? You've probably seen this in, you know, in e-commerce sites. And if you click it, you see that a different colored jumper is going to load. Now, here comes the magic. This is the way. And then I have spoken, right? Would you believe me that these are generated on the fly? So every time when I click on that color, the color overlay gets added and transformed onto the image, still using exactly the same image. I'm not loading 6 different images in here. That's pretty quick and cool. So let's do a test. And I'm going to show you how this is done. The way it's done, I have a color select component in here. Now, I'm not going to go through all the, this is React hooks and all that, right? I'm not going to go through that, but just notice we have a list of colors in here. We have a name and a hex value. So what I would like you to do, and we're going to do whoever is the fastest, please give me the name and the hex of your favorite color. Jonathan, okay. EC, I think that's missing one. It should be 6 digits or letters and digits, right? So it's EC 5444. Okay, and we're going to say this is Jonathan. Yeah, we're just going to call it Jonathan, okay? So I'm going to save that. Now, obviously, because this is a component that I created, we will now get where it's very close to the red color. Give me another one. Give me something that is distinctive from any of these that you see here. Sorry. I wanted to really pop out and, you know, because I think over the transmission, you may not see that. Oh, swell, love it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'm going to rename that like so, okay? Right, so we added this new color, okay? So I'm going to click on that, and what should happen is now we have that color applied, okay? So that's pretty much it. I didn't generate this image. This happened on the fly, and this is now an image that I can move around or change back to the original or use any of these. So how is this done? A very quick recap of this. Where is it? Where is it? So this is one component. So basically, I separated this component because I wanted to have this sort of interface. Oh, sorry, something opened on my laptop here. Right. Can you still hear me? I hope you can. Yes, you can. Okay. Sorry about that. So I have this component just because, you know, I wanted to have a sort of place where I can have these colors. And then inside the product page, what I do, first of all, I say if, you know, you could do this in a million ways, but this is just a demo, right? We have 3 hours to talk about all of this. So I said, if the slug is equal to product/jumper, so that is only the product where I offer this multicolor selection. You could add, you know, I could have added a something in the markdown that says, you know, multi-true, and then do some logic on that, but it doesn't matter. So you get the idea of this. So I only load the color select component if the product is the jumper. And what I do on top, I have this use effect hook. And this is overcomplicated. Well, let me show you where the real logic is. And that is, where is the real logic? The real logic is right here. So as opposed to using the Gatsby image component, please close the terminal. I really can't close the terminal because I need to know if there are any errors, but I can reduce it like this, and so I'm hoping this is helpful. So as opposed to using the Gatsby image component, what I'm doing here is now I'm using the cloudinary image component, which, Cloudinary has a React SDK and it has an image component. I do, a different width, a crop, an F auto, a Q auto, making sure that I serve the image as HTTPS. And I also pass in a transformation. And Cloudinary has a color replace transformation. So all this transformation is doing is effectively going to say, this is the transformation that it adds. Replace color. This is the original color of the jumper, and this is the color that we want to replace it with. So in other words, every time when you click on those color selectors, I just apply a different transformation for Cloudinary. So in fact, if I do right-click, copy image address, and just bring this into my editor, you will see that I have E replace color, the color I want to use, and the color that I want to replace. So if I do F, 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 and F, F, F again, and I just take this URL and load it, this is going to just transform this image, the jumper, to white. That's pretty much it. And this is what happens every time when I click these buttons. I just load a different. I just replace that part of the Cloudinary URL. I just say E replace blue, E replace red, E replace black, E replace indigo, so on and so forth. And that's pretty much it, right? Now this is one thing, right? This is a very interesting aspect of working with e-commerce, right? Because ultimately we are in the realm of the Jamstack. The A component to me is a very special one in the Jamstack because these are the things that allow you to make your application really dynamic, right? Because you don't know how Cloudinary is doing that. We don't need to worry about that. We just use it. The API provider, they are the domain experts. They know how to do stuff, and we just rely on them. And the same stuff is exactly true for Snipcart. So let's take a look at the Snipcart APIs. And there's, I think, two more things I want to talk to you about. Okay, a bunch of questions. So Robert, awesome. How big is the range around the base color which gets replaced? So it will also depend on the image itself, right? So if you have, because I've run lots of tests with this, if you have like a person wearing maybe a white T-shirt, but there are some gray shadows on it, it's not going to be perfect. But here we are assuming that if you're creating an e-commerce site, it's likely that you have a studio where you can take images that are going to be top notch. And in that case, like you saw with this model, with this lady that I'm using here in the demo, this is an image of this person that was taken in a studio, right? So there's not many shadows, not many sort of variations in the original color. Now, what you can do is that I think it's this middle parameter, which is the strength, I think, or I should look it up in the docs because I don't know. This is how strong the replace color should be applied over the original color. So to answer your question, Robert, it would be, first of all, you need to have a studio image, like a very clean color, because Cloudinary is not, even though you're saying it's black magic and other stuff, it won't be able to figure out that this orange and this orange here with a shadow on it are the same. It's just going to say that's a different color. I'm not going to replace that, right? Adriano, so using the jumper's color as a green screen, pretty much. And then you can always fine tune this with this middle parameter. Okay, so that's the place where you can sort of play around with the edges and other stuff. I also had a scenario where there was a picture of a person behind a brick wall, and I think I did a color replace, and it replaced, you know, pixels from the wall, from the t-shirt, and from the person's glass, from the reflection. It's not perfect. You know, I'm not trying to advocate that this, you know, cloudinary is doing color replacement in a perfect way, but certainly it can help you with some interesting things. The repository link. Could someone share that for EJ, please? I shared it a bunch of times. People in the chat will share it with you in just a second. Okay, let's talk Snipcart. So, Snipcart. First of all, thank you, Richard. Header. Inside the, no, let me go back to the app. So just gathering my thoughts. So you probably have noticed there's a shopping cart symbol on the top right-hand corner of the navigation bar. And there's also an add to cart button every time when you open a product. Now, believe it or not, setting up Snipcart is super simple. So all you need to do is go to snipcart.com. And the same is true for Cloudinary, right? So if you want to use Cloudinary, you need to register. We have a free tier. You don't need to pay money. There's, you know, very generous free tier. You can upload pictures, you can do transformations, you can do all of that. But the reason why I'm showing you Snipcart specifically, and I need to log in, which I'll do here on another screen. So the reason why I'm showing you Snipcart specifically is because for the purposes of this workshop, and in order for the application that I'm giving you to work, you need an API key, whereas with Cloudinary, you don't need to have an API key. So just one moment till I log in. And let me just qualify that last statement as well. Providing the fact that you already have images inside Cloudinary, you don't need to specify an API key for the plugins that I'm using, right? I didn't use that. If you want your local images to be uploaded to Cloudinary as part of the Gatsby build process, you need to specify API keys and then take a look at the plugin documentation and you will see how that's done. Okay, so I logged into my Snipcart account. Once you logged in, notice there's this profile picture, or the profile icon on the top right-hand corner. You click that, and towards the bottom, you find a section called API keys. And you just take this very long API key, which is a public test API key, which will be enough for us to use. Also notice, I just closed it, I think. Yeah. No, I did. Where is it? Here. Also notice there's a way to switch between a live and a test environment. Of course, if you do live, then this is going to be a live key where you need to add a credit card, etc., etc., etc. But we're just going to use the test API key for now. And inside your project, you can go to the .env file, or if you don't have that, because I don't think that's part of the GitHub repository, create that, add Snipcart to it, and then just paste the API key that you copied, okay, and just save this file. That's one thing, right? So you take an API key and you put it in an environment variable. The other thing that you need to do is, of course, utilize a plugin. And the plugin that we're going to be using, and I did speak to the people at Snipcart about this, because if you go to the Gatsby plugin page, you will find that there are at least 3 or 4 different plugins for Snipcart available. And what they told me is that the best one that you can use is this one here, Gatsby plugin Snipcart Advanced. Okay, so it was their recommendations that we use this. So I'm using that as well, and I'm also advocating this. In fact, I think it was Francois who I talked to Twitter about this, and I think he helped me. It's good to have you here, Francois. Thank you for joining. Right, so once you get that API key, and just FYI, how I'm reading that environment variable is using the .env package. So inside my Gatsby config on the top, I just read the content of that environment file. And then you need to specify a bunch of options. Public API key is, of course, makes sense. That's the API key that you want to use with Snipcart. Version, which is 3 points, at least at the time when I was creating this workshop, but I also think this is the latest 3.0.30. If you want to use, maybe use the different version before and you don't want to upgrade, you can just specify the exact version that you want to see here. Currency, I'm using British pounds in here. And there's some other options, but I'm using these two here. Use side cart and open cart on add. Open cart on add is set to false, which means that if I'm essentially adding a product to my cart, do I want the cart to open or not? And I said, I don't want to open it. I'll open it whenever I want it to. And use side cart is set to true. You will see this in action in just a moment. So these are just a bunch of configuration values. So with this plugin, what we do, we automatically add the Snipcart, essentially SDK, to our Gatsby project. Once we do that, we can do really, really cool things. So let me open the product page here. No, sorry, let me open the header first, because we talked about that little shopping cart icon in the top of my header, which I will find in just a moment. Right. So I added these two span elements. One is a Snipcart items count, and the other one is called Snipcart total price. So these are just not CSS classes that I added to a span element. And believe it or not, by adding these two things, the Snipcart SDK will be able to track the number of items that we have inside our cart and the total amount of price that we have to pay, and they will inject that data in between the span elements for us automatically. Okay, so what happens if I just demonstrate this to you? Minimize this, put this to the left, and put this to the right. So I'm going to click add to cart. And I already had, okay, let's restart stuff. Sorry, I had something in here already. Continue shopping, right. So refresh. Okay, so I click add to cart, and notice that I get the number and then the value of this particular product showing up here automatically. Let's say that if I now select the red jumper, I say add to cart. Now I have two products totaling to £60. And all of that is driven by Snipcart behind the scenes and their SDKs, plus just these class names in here, right? Snipcart total price is displaying the total price. Snipcart items count is going to display the number of items that I have in my cart. Now the question is, how does Snipcart know how much this jumper is, right? So let's take a look at the individual product listing page right here. And the add to cart button is right here. So this is lines 57 up until 70. And let me make that larger. So the way Snipcart knows about the information of or knows about the product and knows the price and additional information of the product is because I'm feeding that button, first of all, a class name, which is Snipcart add item. Again, notice it is driven by the name of the class, and then I add data attributes to the button. I'm sorry. So I'm adding the data item ID, data item price, data item name, and the data item image, and I'm using essentially the data from my GraphQL query for the page. Okay, so I have, the price is part of my markdown remark from metadata. The image is the image source, which is basically this transformed and optimized cloudinary image. I added a bunch of things in here. like, you can have custom options for stuff that you add to your cart. And the reason why I did this is because when I was first developing this application, I had this sort of, issues in inverted commas whereby I added a product in red to my cart and I added a product in blue, but it showed up as one single product. But because I created these custom options, custom name, color, and the option or the value for this custom value is the actual color name, what will happen if I open my cart, which, by the way, I can just simply do by clicking on the shopping cart icon here, is that they will appear as two separate entities. Okay, so here's the red jumper, and probably I could have maybe also added, appended, just, as opposed to calling this jumper, where's the name? Here, I could have appended, the color, which I'm not going to do now because I'm probably going to mess things up, but, I could have added color and jumper. So this would say red jumper. In this case, it would be original jumper, which is not really good, but you see where I'm getting at. And if I go back to the product listing, I can add additional products as well. So I can add this to the cart, and now I have 3 items in my cart. All right, so I have the shoes and I have the jumpers right here. And the cart summary and all of this is, again, this is provided to me by Snipcart. So in the same way how, Cloudinary is able to crop images and transform them, Snipcart does a very good job in giving us the cart data and allowing us to access the data and the information that we have inside our cart. And we can click on View Detailed Cart, which will just load, only the cart up, or only the contents of my shopping cart up in sort of a larger screen. And I can just go and click Checkout. And this is where things will be very interesting. So let's say, I want to go through this checkout procedure, and they're asking for billing, the name, email, standard details. Let's say that I fill this out, and then I would be taken to the payment. And I think there were lots of questions about payments, and I think someone also confirmed this, but you can also integrate payment solutions with Snipcart, and I'm going to show that to you right now. But for what I'm going to show you, just remember this. We have 2 steps in our checkout flow, billing and payment, okay? So let's go back to this Snipcart dashboard, which is right here. And notice that under your account, you have, so remember that was this little icon here on the top right-hand corner. You have store configuration, and you can configure a lot of things like payment gateways. So in this case, you can integrate with any of these payment providers. And I think this is probably answering Adriano's question, what's the advantage of using Snipcart versus Stripe? I think one advantage, and Francois just added a link in there as well, so I'm hoping I'm going to answer this correctly, but I think, with Stripe, you just use Stripe. With Snipcart, you use Stripe, PayPal, Square, Braintree, and all the others, right? So you can integrate multiple payment providers into your checkout flow if you want. So these are all the available gateways. You click connect, there's a setup procedure, which we're not going to go through, but you basically can integrate these payment providers with your e-commerce site. You can configure, taxes. You can specify, are using a webhook for a taxes provider, you can connect with that. You can add, various tax rates based on particular countries. So you can say, here's a super tax of low, let's do 5%. Only applicable to people, I'm sorry, in Oman. I just pick randomly, I'm sorry, Oman. Okay, you hit save, and now you added this particular tax rate to your country. Shipping, in the same way how you can integrate with multiple payment gateways, you can enable shipping providers as well. So this is currently off, but this is what I wanted to show you. I'm going to switch this to on. This will allow me to, custom shipping. I could integrate it with FedEx, USPS, UPS, and some other shipping providers as well. We're not going to do that, of course, but let's just say that I added shipping, and here's a handling fee of 10. I think I don't remember if I set the default currency, but let's say this is £10. Okay, I'm going to save this. In this, I am inside the Snipcart dashboard. I haven't touched a single line of code inside my application. Yet, if I go back to my application, and let's say, I'm refreshing this, so I'm doing a checkout. Notice that the checkout has now 3 steps. Okay, so you have billing, and now you have shipping, and you have payment. And remember, I didn't touch any of my code inside Gatsby. All of this is generated to be my Snipcart based on the dashboard and based on the configuration that I have set up there. So now if I do full name, email, I don't know, cool, continue shopping. Okay, that, whatever. Also Poland, I don't know, continue. Right. I thought I enabled, oh wait, I did something wrong. I think I enabled shipping. Maybe I didn't hit save. Okay, I need to do a custom shipping, right? On. And save. I think it picked it up. And let's see right here. Okay, so no, I'm doing something wrong. You might need to configure at least one shipping. How's your custom shipping methods? I thought I just did that now. Let's go back here. Oh, I need to configure. Oh, right. Okay. Number of rates for the United. Okay, so let's enter an address inside the United Kingdom. Okay, so you can specify custom shipping. You can select all the places where you want to ship stuff. And now, if I, so let's remember it's UK, right? It was the UK. It was the UK. So let's go and change my shipping address. That will work. London. There we go. So now we have a shipping option enabled. And if we continue to payment, we will be, of course, charged for not only the products, but also the shipping. Okay, so I think I can do this. I think I set this up to function on localhost. Fingers crossed. If not, I've done some order couldn't be processed. That's fine. But let's assume we were successful in making this particular order. And on top of, so there are additional things that you can specify here. There are, webhooks, there are orders and invoices, domains and URLs. There's lots of stuff that you can set up. And I think there were questions about inventory. So notice there's an inventory option in here as well. So you can manage inventory for your products. But the other thing that I want to show you is that if you go to the other part of the Snipcart dashboard, which is on the left-hand side, and if you click dashboard, this is where you get a sort of overview of your store. So you can see, how many orders you have. And I think I need to go back in time because when I did the tests, maybe it was last year as well, but let's just do a big query. So here you go. There were 8 orders in my shop. These were the total amount of sales. There were 4 new customers, 0 returning. So you basically get an overview of what happened inside your store. And furthermore, I think I really liked this this feature, which was you get the top customers. I've done a bunch of tests. You can see which were the top products for the selected period that I did, and it was the product called the winter jumper. Here are the latest completed orders, and there's this option here on the left which is called abandoned carts. So you can actually take a look at all the cards that were abandoned. And in fact, what you see here, filtered down for the last 7 days, is the card that, where my payment failed. But this is the 3 jumpers, so the 2 jumpers and the shoes that we added worth of $69.50. And what you can do, you can take a look at all the details for this person, and you can go and email them. And I'm pretty sure, if you've purchased something on an e-commerce site, you may have received similar messages, and you could just say, hello. In this case, we know who the customer is. Is there something that I can help you with? Maybe offer a discount code. Do whatever you want to make sure that the person is going to complete the purchase. So I showed you a bit of these 2 APIs. Now, I need to say that, there's, of course, a lot more to both Snipcart and to Cloudinary. We're just really scratching the surface, but I'm hoping that this will get you started in trying to explore what these 2 API providers are capable of and what they can do. Okay, so adding to cart, color components. Right, so here comes the big thing. And I think, who was that person who asked that question? Let me take a sip of water while I think. I'm forgetting the name, but that was a question about pre-rendering all the pages for your boss or colleague or something similar. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. So we now have our application ready. And we're going to run Gatsby build. The Gatsby build is going to take all our code, all the stuff that we've written, and it's going to generate HTML pages for us. And this is what I forgot to show you. How is it going to generate the HTML pages? Remember, we talked about the Gatsby node file. And we talked about the onCreate node, but I mentioned that I'm going to come back to the create pages section, which is about 40 lines of code. This is the place, or this is the code that is going to allow Gatsby to know how to build these static pages for the products. Okay, and it's called create pages. It's an action that we can use in Gatsby. So first of all, we're going to query for all the products that we have. And remember, for each of the products, we added a template key. And the template key, product-page, references the product page JavaScript file, the product page template that we created. Okay, so this is going to tell Gatsby that, hey, take a look at all these products, take a look at the template key, which theoretically allows me to apply different templates for different products if I want to. So I'm reading that along with the slug and additional things. And then I call the create page method for every single markdown file that we find. I get the path via the slug value, which is a custom field that we have. And I tell Gatsby what is the component it should use to generate the static pages. And I just link to the template key. So it basically linked to templates product page.js. And as a context, I pass in a node.id. So why am I passing in this context? Remember, for every single product, I need to pass in an ID to get the product related information for inside Gatsby, right? So I'm passing in an ID for every single page that I want to create. And this is the code, and it's still building production JavaScript and CSS bundles here. And this is the code that will create, it's already here, it's going to create a public folder, but let me just wait for this particular build to complete. It should be a couple of seconds. And essentially, Reza, how to combine JavaScript files in build files and how to combine JavaScript files in production. So Gatsby does that automatically for you. So all you need to do is run Gatsby build, and Gatsby is going to bundle up everything, you know, minify everything and create everything for you to be a production ready site. So once you run, excuse me, once you run Gatsby build, you will have access to this public folder. And if you extend that, notice there is going to be an index file in here somewhere. So use this index file. We have a products folder. And inside the products folder, we have subfolders for each of the products. And each of those contain an index.html file. And this file contains, now one thing, FYI, I'm not doing, I don't do Tailwind CSS optimization, so that's why you have a lot of CSS in here. We can fix that, of course. But what you will find in here is all the text. So here's baseball cap, here's the price, here's the product description. So basically, if you just take this index.html file, the content of it, and you go to like a JSBin, JSBin.com, and you paste the entire content to, you know, to any random place, like so, notice that you get back exactly the site that we developed, because everything that we need to display this page is inside that static HTML file. Okay, the data, the, you know, the price, the product description, the image, everything, all the functionality is in here, even though I'm using it in a completely different random place. And this is the folder that you can go and deploy. So it's the public folder that you can go and deploy. So let's do a quick deployment as well. So how do you do a deployment? Well, we're going to be using Netlify for this. So app.netlify.com. I have an account. If you don't have an account, you know, oh, I'm not logged in. So you need to log in. So let me just do that real quick here. I think that's my account. It will do. Okay, so I'm logged into my Netlify account. How do we deploy this, right? That's again very important in the Jamstack. So I'm going to say new site from Git. Click on GitHub, and I already have an integration between. Oh, maybe I don't. Hang on. Okay, you know what? Let me change my browser. Netlify.com. And I think, okay, so I'm logged in here. So again, new site from Git, select GitHub. There's a window that's popped up. You didn't see that, but it says authorized. I'm already authorized. There's a bunch of repositories that I have, but if you don't see it here, there's a link that says configure your Netlify up here. I'm going to log into my GitHub account on my other screen. And all I'm doing is essentially selecting the repository that we are using here, which was called GatsbyConf. And it's going to give access to that repository. Okay, so here it is. I click on it, and Netlify automatically knows that it should run npm run build if it needs to deploy this project. Furthermore, it knows that it needs to deploy this particular directory as a published directory. Now I'm going to click on Show Advanced I'm going to add a new variable as well. I'm just going to take the snip cart environment variable, because we will be using that. Snip cart, and the value is this. So I'm just setting up an environment variable. And I'm going to hit deploy site. Where did that go? So what happens behind the scenes now is site deployment in progress. I'm going to click on deploys. And you can see that there's a deploy happening. If I click on it, there's a deployment log happening. So what happens behind the scenes now is Netlify is going to clone that repository, is going to install all the dependencies, and excuse me, and it's going to run the Gatsby build command. So it's going to generate a static build for us, and it's going to offer up the public folder for access, which means that theoretically, in a couple of seconds, hopefully, we'll be able to see our application live. So you see there's the Gatsby build command, which is executed by Netlify automatically for us. It goes through the create pages step as well. I don't know if you can see that, so let me just zoom in. I lost it now. So it runs the create pages, which is going to create all the static pages for us. Okay, so it's still working on something. And in a couple of seconds, we will get a deployment. Now, there's a lot of things that you can do in Netlify, and I'm not going to get into that because that would be a workshop on its own. But basically, we get this peaceful Nuth BA9979 URL, and this is going to be the place where we can take a look at our application once the deployment is completed. Okay, so let's take a look at the log. Where is it now? It's doing, what is it doing? Gatsby is running, deploying the site. Site is live. Perfect. Okay, so we have our site live. So let's try that. Let me click on that. Here's the full URL. Open this. And this is now our deployed application. So I can go to products. I have the same functionality that you saw before. I can add this to the cart. Then I can go through the checkout flow as well. Now, why did I show this to you? The reason why I showed this to you is because from a development perspective, this is really going to be convenient for us because I'm going to now add a new product. Okay, so I'm going to go to source, content. I'm just going to copy this here. And I'm just going to say new jeans.md. And I'm going to say this is, how should we call it? New jeans. Okay, I'm going to leave everything in here. Now we can, as developers, do a git add and do a git commit and do new product, edit, new product, edit, and do a git push. Right? So we, obviously do branches, etc. So you basically create some changes to your application. You push those changes, and what happens in a Netlify, because we have done a connection between our GitHub instance and our Gatsby site and Netlify, if there's a git push, it will automatically rebuild our project. And this is what you see in action here, right? So that's why I have a new build, and notice that the commit message is also displayed here. So the commit message is effectively saying that new product is added, and there's a deployment that we're doing now. And it's going to be, redeploying everything. Netlify is automatically going to disable all the CDN caches, and it's going to push the new version of our site to the world. So in a couple of seconds, once it goes through, the usual steps, we will be able to see a new version of our sites. If I just go to products, we should see our new product listed in here. So I'm hoping that this is going to be the case. And I think I have about 8 more minutes to go. So that's going to be the last thing that I'm going to show you. And we're going to go back to the slides and try to answer a bunch of your questions. Okay, so how's the deployment? Still building. Let's see. Netlify build complete. Site is live now, so I'm just going to go back to our site, refresh. And as expected, here we have new genes. Okay, and this is now available. I can add it to my cart, right? And now it is part of the entire application. Now, one more thing. What if you made a mistake? Maybe it's a bug. You didn't mean to deploy something. What you can do, if you go back to deploys, you can select, you can take a look at, here we have 2 deploys that happened. One is published, which is what we see, and all the previous deploys can be seen here as well. I can click on a previous deploy, and I can just say publish deploy. And believe it or not, I just reverted all my changes. So if I refresh, this is now the old version of my site, just like that. Okay, very, very powerful as well. All right. I'm sorry, I missed kind of the questions, but let me do my last set of slides. And then I'll open up the stage for questions. So one resource that I would like to show you, and I mentioned this a couple of times, this is gemstack.training. Okay, so that's effectively the URL as well. So gemstack.training is a site that I run. There are, I think, 11 video courses about the Gemstack. All of those are for free. Okay, so let me just open that real quick for you. There are a bunch of videos covering various aspects of the Gemstack. Okay, so there are a bunch of videos about Gatsby. In fact, if you want to go through this again, there's Create an E-commerce app with Gatsby here, which goes through the basics of Gatsby in a sort of easier fashion, right? So if you got stuck or you're really new, I do recommend that you take a look at that. And there are some additional stuff. I just noticed that my laptop is not charging and I have 8% left, which is really not good. I don't know why my laptop is not charging. Okay, I need to solve that. So there are a bunch of videos in here that you can take a look at. Gatsby Cloud, there's additional ones on Gatsby, authentication of Gemstack, additional stuff that you can take a look at. So again, this is Gemstack.training, video courses, and all of them are for free. And a bunch of resources for you, just docs, take a look at them. I think I need to disconnect from, wait, I need to disconnect my webcam because I think it's sucking the power. So let me just try to fix that.